Focus on Headline. All right, let's take a look at what major issues are making the headlines today on Focus on Headline. For this, joining us in the studio, we have our reporters in Changana and Yoon Hye-jung. Guys, welcome back.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening to you guys and a happy Friday. We're going to start things off with the ongoing diplomatic issues here. We know that during the summit meeting here in Seoul back on Sunday, we had President Yoon Seung-il and Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida. They agreed on a number of things, but including allowing a group of South Korean experts to visit the Fukushima nuclear power plant, or I should say the crippled Fukushima nuclear power plant. And this is in regards to Tokyo's plan to release its contaminated wastewater sometime in the summer. We know that it's going to happen after the G7 summit in Hiroshima. There was sort of a misunderstanding between the two sides on the scope of quote-unquote inspections. Now, South Korea thought that it was going to be a full-on inspection to see whether or not the waters going into the ocean will be safe enough, whereas Japan said, well, no, they're going to be there just to get a detailed assessment on the issue. So there is no real inspection. So a lot of conflicts on that front. Well, a ministerial level meeting to decide on the details of that was held earlier today. Hannah, you have more on this.
Yes, so South Korea and Japan held a ministerial level meeting in Seoul today to discuss the dispatch of a team to inspect contaminated water at the Fukushima nuclear power plant. During the meeting, the two countries plan to coordinate the specific schedule and scope of activities of the Korean inspection team, which will inspect the radioactive water from May 23rd to May 24th. So now top-notch experts in safety regulations will comprise the inspection team for safety checks ahead of the planned release of radioactive water from the plant. Park Gyu-yeon, the first deputy chief of the Office for Government Policy Coordination, told reporters during a press conference. So now Park also stated that the exact size of the inspection team will be decided during working-level consultations between the two countries scheduled for later in the day. South Koreans have remained concerned about possible health hazards from the release of more than 1 million tons of water from the wrecked plant. However, the two countries appear to be at odds over the nature of the plant inspection. While Seoul has reiterated that the inspection is aimed at looking into whether Japan's treatment facilities are working properly, Tokyo has struck a different tone. Earlier this week, Japanese Industry Minister Yasutoshi Nishimura told reporters that the inspection is meant to help deepen understanding about the safety of the release, not to evaluate or certify its safety. The purpose of inspection activities is to provide an overall review of the safety of the water discharged into the ocean, Park reiterated. Park said the experts will look into the overall operation of Tokyo's water treatment capacity and discharge facility, along with its capability to analyze radioactive material. Park noted it marks the first time for South Korea as an IAEA member state to dispatch an independent team to Japan. A separate inspection is currently being carried out by the IAEA.
Of course, you can understand why there is a conflict between the two sides. It's simply like this. The South Korean side, obviously, since the contaminated water will affect the waters off the coast of South Korea. And what some experts are saying, the surface water is going to arrive in like 4 to 7 months is what they're saying after the release. And now remind you, it's not like they're only going to release this once. It's going to be in intervals. There's going to be more and more wastewater. And so it's sort of understandable that the South Korean side, they want to see whether or not it's safe, the waters are safe, and whether or not they're doing everything done. They want to test out the waters. They want to test out the filtration system to see that it is indeed safe. But basically, Japan is going, no. You have to trust us. We're going to tell you how safely it's being done and that the waters are safe and the ocean life and the seafood is going to be safe to eat. But it's just going to be based on our word. You have to trust us. So you can tell why there is going to be some conflict in this. But again, I guess in some ways it's better than what South Korea had before, in that Japan wasn't really sharing a whole lot of information. That was a big problem. President Yoon Seung-il, even during his summit in Tokyo back in March, said he wanted transparent information, scientific information that the waters are going to be safe. Well, again, despite many opposition from not just South Korea, but also countries like in China as well, they are going to be releasing this. And Japan is saying that they're going to explain to the South Korean government the status of the contaminated water. Listen, we'll give you transparency. Hye-jung, you have more on this.
Well, yesterday, the Japanese government reaffirmed its stance to explain to the South Korean government the status of the contaminated water from the crippled Fukushima nuclear power plant. But it did also say that it will begin discharging the water this summer into the ocean as they originally planned. Now, Japanese Chief Cabinet Secretary Hirokazu Matsuno said that the Japanese government will explain the latest situation on the Fukushima power plant water treated through the advanced liquid processing system. He added that the Japanese government will continue to explain transparently and sincerely based on scientific evidence while seeking verification from the IAEA. Now, TEPCO, Tokyo Electric Power Company, which operates the Fukushima nuclear power plant, announced last month that it expects to delay the time of when its contaminated water storage tanks will be full. Now, before storage, the wastewater produced at Fukushima is treated to remove almost all of the radioactive elements. And initially, they predicted the tanks to be full this summer to fall, but they pushed this to February to June next year. And regarding the discharge of contaminated water into the ocean, despite the delay in filling the Fukushima nuclear plant's treated water tank storage capacity, the Chief Cabinet Secretary confirmed that the expected timing of the release of water would be sometime during the spring or summer, and that there is no change to this schedule.
Again, we're seeing sort of different changes in the scheduling of this because, like Hye-jung said, it was initially supposed to happen as early as the spring, but they're doing this in summer. And a lot of people are saying, pundits are saying that they're probably scheduling this after the G7 summit in Hiroshima. And now a lot of people are saying, well, at the same time, if it is indeed safe, why not just release it before the G7 summit? They're afraid that there's going to be a lot of criticism from the international community. Then in that case, there is some problem with the contaminated water. We'll have to see whether or not eventually the South Korean inspectors will be allowed to inspect the water and the filtration system to see if indeed it is going to be safe, because it's only fair. The water will impact all of us here in South Korea. We have been, though, seeing really what's being dubbed as a spring thaw, right, in relations between South Korea and Japan amid the regional security threats from North Korea, thorny historical issues, which I would say it hasn't fully been resolved, but they have in some ways resolved the whole forced labor issue with the foundation, the fund, and so forth. Well, President Yoon Suk-yeol invited former Japanese Prime Minister Taro Aso for dinner, while Korean lawmakers are headed to Japan to participate in a friendly football match scheduled for tomorrow. Okay, Hannah, you have more on this.
So President Yoon Suk-yeol invited former Japanese Prime Minister Taro Aso for dinner at his residence on Thursday and asked for continued support as both countries enjoy improved ties recently. Aso responded by showing his appreciation for President Yoon's efforts to improve on years of frosty ties, saying there has been a significant step forward since Yoon took office. Aso, who serves as Vice President of Japan's ruling Liberal Democratic Party, is on a trip to South Korea to attend a forum on Friday. He also chairs a civilian committee on South Korea-Japan cooperation and was in South Korea last November when he also met President Yoon. Meanwhile, 24 Korean lawmakers from the ruling and opposition parties will depart for Japan on Friday to participate in a friendly soccer match with Japanese politicians with the goal of promoting friendship between the two countries' lawmakers and deepening mutual understanding. Lawmakers from the two countries will meet tomorrow at the Nissan Stadium, also known as the International Stadium Yokohama in Japan, where the 2002 World Cup final took place. The upcoming match is a return visit to last November's visit by Japanese lawmakers to South Korea to commemorate the 20th anniversary of the 2002 FIFA World Cup Korea-Japan. During the visit, the two countries played a friendly soccer match at the Seoul World Cup Stadium, where the opening ceremony of the Korea-Japan World Cup was held. South Korea won 5-3 in that match, the first in 4 years due to a thaw in relations between the two countries. Now, South Korean lawmakers showed their strong will to win the game and said that they cannot lose against Japan.
Well, you know what they say. We can't even lose rock, paper, scissors to Japan. Is what it is. I just find this. I like this. I'm a big fan of this for a number of reasons. Not just because of the thawing of relations between South Korea and Japan, but a thawing of relations between the two political parties. The only time that they could really cut together and play together, not fight,
Become one team.
Become one team, because you have the ruling PPP and the main opposition Democratic Party lawmakers. By the way, both male and female lawmakers take part in this football match, and I do remember this one in Seoul World Cup Stadium where they did win 5-3. Now I was never so happy, never been so happy to see the lawmakers play together and not fighting and yelling at each other, but high fives and things like that. I guess I'm a big fan of sports diplomacy, and this is a good example of it, even if it means amongst the same Koreans and the same lawmakers from opposition parties. Nevertheless, we're going to be talking about the economy this time. It seems that the South Korean economic slowdown is continuing, unfortunately, despite domestic consumption, showing a steady recovery. Haejang, give us the reason behind the slowdown.
So the South Korea's finance ministry said today that the country's domestic consumption has been showing a steady recovery, but the economy has continued to slow due to sluggish exports and facility investment. According to the Ministry of Economy and Finance, recently inflation has been slowing down in Korea, with the domestic consumption also posting a rebound. In April, Korea's inflation grew 3.7% on year, marking its slowest pace in over a year. The ministry, however, mentioned an economic slowdown in the monthly assessment report, the Green Book, for the fourth consecutive month, citing weak exports and facility investment. In April, South Korea's overall exports fell 14.2% on year to $49.6 billion. Exports have recorded an on-year fall since October last year, amid aggressive monetary tightening by major economies to curb inflation. The decline was mostly led by the semiconductor sector, with the price of memory chips falling across the globe amid a decline in demand and oversupply. In terms of external factors, the finance ministry said global uncertainties remain due to the monetary tightening moves coupled with the prolonged war between Russia and Ukraine. On the other hand, the reopening of the Chinese economy was pointed out as a positive factor for Korea's economy. And earlier this week, the Korea Development Institute slashed its growth outlook for the South Korean economy this year by 0.3 percentage point to 1.5%. Citing slowing exports of chips, while the Bank of Korea suggests a 1.6% rise. And the International Monetary Fund also expects South Korea's annual growth for this year to stand at 1.7%.
Yeah, I know they continue to mention the reopening of the Chinese economy as a positive news, but I mean, there's still a number of issues at hand, including all the semiconductor export ban that the U.S. seems to be putting, which is impacting the South Korean semiconductor producers. And of course, there's been tensions between Seoul and Beijing. And so there's some saying that there's going to be not so much of a rebound with the people-to-people exchange, right? Not a whole lot of Chinese tourists coming into Korea despite the opening. Guys, something that we have been talking about extensively this past week, and including yesterday when we had Professor Yang Jun-suk to talk about the state of South Korea's state-run utility, Korea Electric Power Corporation, or KEPCO. They said Friday that they're going to be selling a major building in Seoul, freeze wages of ranking employees. I cannot believe this is even a thing, because how dare you get a raise in this situation here? But this is as part of its efforts to improve financial soundness and achieve management innovation over mounting losses they've been facing for years now. Hannah, tell us more about this.
Yes, so KEPCO suffered snowballing losses mounting up to over 6 trillion won in the first quarter of this year due to high global energy prices and limited hikes in electricity rates amid high inflation and growing economic burdens on the people. So the company decided to push forward with a set of self-rescue measures that aim to save more than 25 trillion won over the next 5 years. KEPCO earlier came up with plans that call for saving 20 trillion won through the restructuring of overseas businesses and property sales, but the ruling People Power Party and the government have demanded stronger reform measures before seeking electricity rate hikes. Under the latest plan, the company said that it will sell its building in Seoul's financial district of Yeouido, along with dozens of buildings owned by the company and its affiliates across the country, and rent part of its art center in the southern Seoul and several other properties. It decided to freeze the wages of ranking officials, to use the money to support energy vulnerable groups, and begin talks with the labor union to have all the workers join the move. Kepco will also adjust plans to construct electricity facilities and streamline its organizational structure. On that very day, which is actually today, the head of Korea Electric Power Corporation, Cheong Seung-il, announced to the employees during a video call that he will step down from the post amid mounting political pressures over the company's ballooning deficit.
Again, I mean, it's amongst, like, for us, like average Joes, it's just unbelievable, right? That they're freezing the wages of ranking officials. It seems like such a heroic thing where it should be probably the minimal thing. It's even like, I believe, what was it? Was it Amazon or one of the major IT corporations? They cut basically like tens of thousands of employees, and yet the CEO got a bump in its raise and so forth. So it really isn't fair. But again, all that aside, the situation with Kepco right now, unless, as Professor Yang Jun-suk told us yesterday, unless we raise the electricity rates by a lot as in like 15% and not like the 5% or so that we're expecting in the second half of the year, they're not going to be making any sort of recovery in their deficit, also because it's been happening for such a long time. But if that wasn't the only thing that's been going wrong for Kepco, they're going to have to compensate for the damages caused by the wildfire that started in Gangneung last month, because they found out that one of their electric wires was pointed out to be the cause of the whole fire, and that was a big one over in Gangneung. Haejang, tell us more about this.
So last month, a wildfire raged through Korea's eastern coastal city of Gangneung, a city in Gangwon province. Now, this fire happened on March 11th, turning an area of forest 170 times the size of a soccer field into ashes, displacing nearly 500 people. So the residents affected by last month's wildfire have formed an emergency committee and are demanding compensation from Kepco. The police believe the wildfire started when a 15-meter tall pine tree snapped due to strong winds. It seems that the tree struck a power line, and sparks from the broken wire is what caused the wildfire. And the police will reveal the final results of the investigation of the fire as soon as the results by the National Institute of Scientific Investigation are available. Now, an emergency committee has been formed, composed of around 180 residents affected by the wildfire. And residents are holding Kepco accountable for the fire, saying that it was negligent, not properly managing the trees around the power lines. The emergency committee is requesting for Kepco's compensation, and it's even said that they will take legal action if needed to make the compensation happen. They've also recently consulted with a law firm to file a lawsuit for damages against Kepco, but it will be a long time before any compensation is finalized. So earlier in the case of the 2019 wildfire in Gosong, which is also located in Gangwon province, started with a spark from a power line as well, scorching more than 3,000 acres of land. Now, regarding this fire, among 20 lawsuits between Kepco and the residents, only one case was sentenced at its first trial just last month. The Chuncheon District Court ordered Kepco to pay 60% of the assessed value of the damage caused by the fire, which was about $6.6 million. So as we can see from this case, the Gangneung wildfire case has a long way to go before any compensation happens, and the trials are expected to take years.
Yeah, again, I mean, stuff like this isn't one of those things that happens in a matter of few months and things like that. So it's really unfortunate for many of those residents who've lost their houses and things like that. But we'll see what... Again, man, everything is going wrong with Kepco right now. You know what's also very interesting, and I got a good smirk out of this morning when I saw this news. Terraform co-founder Do Kwon, probably at one point one of the most hated person in the entire country. He attended his first trial over in Montenegro. He's been detained there for having forged documents while being on a run. He said he wasn't on a run. He wasn't hiding, but obviously he was. This is over the massive cryptocurrency crash. He pleaded not guilty. And this is not guilty over the fraud issue over the cryptocurrency. Is for the forged documents and forgery and things like that. And he's also requested that he get bail. Hannah, fill us in on this.
Yes, so as mentioned, Do Kwon, the CEO of Terraform, appeared at a district court in Montenegro's capital on Thursday. This is actually his first trial since being arrested in the Balkan country back in March for holding a fake passport while he was under an international arrest warrant for defrauding investors in crypto schemes. Also appearing was an aide of Kwon's who has been detained alongside him. They were allegedly holding Costa Rican and Belgian passports, respectively, at the time. The two pleaded not guilty, with Kwon claiming his Costa Rican passport was legitimate and that he has done nothing illegal. They also filed for bail, offering to each pay 400,000 euros or some 436,000 US dollars. Their lawyer reportedly proposed that supervision measures be imposed instead of detention. While state prosecutors objected to offering bail, the court judge still has to offer her ruling on the proposal. The judge asked Kwon about how much exactly his assets are worth, citing the need to factor this into her decision-making. Kwon actually refrained from answering, of course, but he reportedly told the court that he and his wife jointly own some property in Seoul worth around 4 million US dollars. The next hearing date is set for June 16th. This comes as both South Korea and the U.S. are seeking the extradition of Kwon in connection with a $40 billion crash of his Terraform Labs cryptocurrency that devastated retail investors around the world. But if convicted in Montenegro over forged documents, Kwon could actually face up to 5 years in prison before being extradited.
Let me tell you why I got a good laugh out of this, is because he came out saying that the Costa Rican passport was legitimate, right? Which means he holds Costa Rican nationality. I had to do a double check on this. I went on Wikipedia because I could have sworn he was Korean national, right? And so, yes, he was born in Seoul, South Korea on September 6, 1991. Man, he's young.
Oh my God.
He's
so
very
young.
He's very young, 1991. And he has no links to Costa Rica. He has no links to Belgium. And so I don't know how those passports are legitimate. But he's doing, basically what he's doing is he's doing all he can to delay everything right now. He knows that if he faces charges over in the United States, I know that South Korea and United States are both going for it. Right now, some of the investors in South Korea are like, please, I hope he gets sent over to the United States where the law is probably, the punishment is much stricter there. So we'll see what happens, but this is another trial that's going to go on for a while, and he's going to try to delay it as much as possible here. This is another topic that we've been covering for the past few weeks, actually. Radok-yeon, he's head of an investment consulting firm. He was finally arrested Thursday, this for the suspected stock manipulation that's really shook the local financial markets. We talked about how stock prices for like Samcheonli and Seoul Gas, all these gas companies tanking a few weeks ago. Hae-jung, tell us how this case is going.
Right. The Seoul Southern District Court issued an arrest warrant for Radok-yeon, the head of an unregistered investment consulting firm, citing the risk of him destroying evidence and fleeing. Prosecutors had filed for the writ late Wednesday, and the court held a detention hearing earlier in the day. Ra's firm was at the center of the recent collapse of stock prices of 9 companies, as we mentioned, including energy firm Samcheonli and Seoul City Gas. The stocks of the 9 listed companies had steadily risen for years before nosediving late last month following mass sell-offs through SG Securities. And about 1,000 investors are said to have suffered a huge loss. Now, Radok-yeon is suspected of having manipulated the prices of the stocks through an order matching technique after taking over mobile phones and personal information from investors. And prosecutors believe that Ra and those involved in the scheme pocketed 264 billion won, which is about $198 million in unfair profits by manipulating the stock prices, half of which was taken in the name of commission. Ra is also accused of concealing part of the investment proceeds and evading taxes through his business entities and running an unregistered investment consulting business. Now, the two other key suspects, An and Pyeon, were also detained by prosecutors on charges of colluding with Ra. According to the prosecution, An, a former professional golf player, was allegedly used as a window to retrieve commission from the investors. And Pyeon is the one who led the recruitment of large investors while managing the company. And today, the two went through a warrant review which lasted for about 4 hours, and it was reported that Pyeon denied the allegations of masterminding the crime and manipulating the stock prices.
Yeah, and as you know, when this with this whole scandal, ballad singer Im Chang-jung was kind of mentioned in the whole allegations, and he came out saying that, listen, I lost like $5 million. There's no way I'm part of this because I lost money. But again, I don't know. Some people are saying he could have been a victim of this, and some people are saying, he made bad investments and who knows where the money and things like that. But it is. Again, they played it really well. They bought gas companies, right? And they knew that over the past few years because of the Russia-Ukraine issue that the gas prices were going to go up. And hence they, quote unquote, invested in gas companies because it was supposed to naturally go up. But it went up unusually too much. That's what it was, right? We're going to move on, talk about the economy. But this is a really concerning one out of the United States. The U.S. has one of the biggest debts, right? And it's one of those things where they have this debt, but they never pay this off. And they have this major debt to China, right? And then a lot of people are saying that the reason why this whole thing with China is because, the U.S. just doesn't want to pay back the debt and things like that. We've gone to a point where the U.S. could default. June 1st is the big date right now. The IMF is warning that a U.S. default would cause very serious repercussions for the global economy and security as well, with the U.S. Congress unable to strike an agreement on the debt ceiling here, referring to how much more they're allowed to borrow. They cannot borrow anymore. They've already reached the ceiling right now. President Biden is saying that because of this issue, and this is the top of the agenda right now, he could either attend the G7 summit in Hiroshima virtually or even not go at all. That's how serious it's getting right now. Hannah, you have more on this.
Right. So according to the International Monetary Fund on Thursday, a potential U.S. default caused by the failure to raise its debt ceiling would have very serious repercussions for the country's economy as well as the global economy and security. Speaking at a news briefing, IMF spokesperson Julie Kozak warned that authorities need to stay vigilant on new vulnerabilities in the U.S. banking sector due to likely higher borrowing costs. She added that higher interest would also bring about broader instability in the global economy. A similar warning was issued by U.S. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen, who said a default on U.S. payments could come as early as June 1st if Congress fails to raise the borrowing cap. And a U.S. default would mean much more than just further instability in the global economy. In response to a possible U.S. default, J.P. Morgan Chase CEO Jamie Dimon said his company has convened a weekly war room. He added that war room sessions will become more frequent, potentially several times a day as June 1st approaches. Dimon also warned that a potential default would spark panic among investors in the U.S. and will trickle into the global stock markets. Meanwhile, President Joe Biden on Wednesday hinted that he may attend the upcoming G7 summit in Hiroshima, Japan, virtually or not go at all, depending on the course of his negotiations with congressional leaders on the debt ceiling. His comments came a day after talks with congressional leaders failed to produce a breakthrough. While Biden said he's still committed to attending the gathering of the 7 major economies, the debt issue remains the single most important thing on the agenda at the moment for the U.S. leader.
You know, the weird thing is that over the past, year, 10 months now, right? Over the past 10 months, the U.S. Central Bank has raised its key rates for 10 straight sessions is what it is, right? And so now that's the reason why we have a gap between the U.S. Fed and the Bank of Korea. It's like the gap is like 1.75, I believe, which is the biggest gap that we've ever seen. And because of the gap, if you remember, like late last year, the U.S. dollar against the Korean won was ridiculous.
Right.
It almost reached
1,400?
You almost reached 1,500.
Oh, 500.
It surpassed 1,400. It was like kind of inching towards 1,500. And then the South Korean government kind of intervened and they were able to bring it down and things like that. Right now, it's something at around 1,320 or something like that is what it is. If the U.S. defaults, right, June 1st is the exact date. If the congressional leaders can't come up with an agreement to raise this debt ceiling, which Biden doesn't seem like he wants to raise this right now. And the criticism is that, dude, during the Biden administration, there was so much money that was being spent. I mean, one of the major reasons is because of the Biden administration. Why are you not raising the debt ceiling? We're going to default. If it defaults, the dollar is going to collapse. And so when the dollar collapses, the world is going to go into a panic, right? On the flip side, I don't know if you guys have the Korean won, a bunch of Korean wons, it's going to be stronger against the dollar and things like that. But again, that's the thing, that's the unfair thing. It's just like when a big country like the United States, defaults, the whole world basically gets impacted by this. And so a lot of us are going to take a closer look. For our listeners out there next week, we're hopefully going to get an expert's take on what a potential U.S. default would mean. It is very concerning the fact that companies like J.P. Morgan Chase set up a war room just in case something like this actually happens. In the meantime, we have the White House announcing Thursday that National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan met with a top Chinese official Wang Yi over in Vienna for what they said was candid and constructive talks. Haejung, you have more on this.
Right. Now, in this meeting, which took place from May 10th to the 11th, is among the highest level engagements between the U.S. and Chinese officials since the spy balloon incident earlier this year, which caused Secretary of State Anthony Blinken to postpone a planned trip to Beijing. And meetings come as Washington and Beijing prepare for more in-person engagements between senior officials and as the U.S. seeks to open lines of communication with China amid a strained relationship. And according to the White House, the two sides had candid, substantive, and constructive discussions on key issues in the U.S.-China bilateral relationship, global and regional security issues, Russia's war against Ukraine, and cross-strait issues. The White House also mentioned that this meeting was part of ongoing efforts to seek communication and responsibly manage competition. A U.S. senior administration official said the meeting was an attempt to put communications back on track after the spy balloon incident and mentioned that the meeting lasted 8 hours over the course of 2 days in Vienna. The official also added that Sullivan told Wang that the U.S. and China are competitors, but that the U.S. does not seek conflict or confrontation, and he reiterated the U.S. position to Wang that the U.S. remains committed to its one China policy. Sullivan also raised the cases of 3 American citizens wrongfully detained in China, and the two sides also discussed the issue of counter-narcotics as well. But they did not get into the specifics about rescheduling Blinken's trip to Beijing just yet. Now, Chinese officials saw the discussions as substantive and said both sides could and would continue to make good use of this channel of strategic communication.
It's really interesting because over the past several years now, the tension between Washington and Beijing is at its peak, I think. And you would assume, let me tell you how much money, how much the U.S. owes China. Of total, we were talking about the debt ceiling and things like that, and how much the debt the U.S. has a debt of 31.38 trillion U.S. dollars. 31.38 trillion dollars is a lot. Now, of that leaves 25 million in unused borrowing capacity. They could spend $25 million in like 5 minutes is what they can do. So that's why it's really serious right now. Of the $31.38 trillion that they owe, China owns more than $980 billion. So about $1 trillion in debt is owed to China right now. China is probably going, give me my money, give us our money. And the U.S., we don't have any money to give you guys right now, which is why they're saying that maybe this conflict that they're having with this whole export, restrictions they're putting on and the trade war that's been sparked a few years ago, starting with the Trump administration, might be because of this. But the other thing, a lot of people are now slowly, I don't know, outside of the United States, a lot of people are sort of siding with China at this time because they're saying it's not fair what China is going through. Now, again, they also have other issues like human rights and things like that. Nyanti, yes, no way that the U.S. can pay this back. That's what it is. But China, in the flip side, what they're doing is interesting, is now they're trying to play, we're the good guys in all this.
Oh.
Right? Because for the longest time, U.S. has been this American eagle soaring, really nice people who help out. But China is now playing this. They're trying to play that role because they're trying to mediate the Russia-Ukraine war, right? The peace treaty, right? And so a lot of people are actually skeptical as to know whether or not they're actually willing to somehow pull this off without giving all the upper edge to Russia. But it does get very interesting. Alicia Fisher from the United States, she says, we, the U.S., don't need to owe more, so let's not fight to increase the debt and just pay. The problem is not that we don't need, yes, they would not want to, they only have $25 million in capacity right now to borrow, but the thing is, every country needs to borrow, and when it comes to like importing and things like that, $25 million is, I mean, it might be a lot of money for us, but it's really nothing for the United States. And so if they're unable to raise this cap right now, I don't know what they're trying to, how much they're trying to cap this, raise this by. I think it's like another few $1 trillion that they're trying to raise it.
But that's only going to be for the time being.
It's only for the time being, yeah. And I mean, goodness, I mean, I don't even want to think about what a default for the United States would mean moving forward here. But it is going to get very, very serious here. We have Nyanti, who also says, I think the U.S. is being very unrealistic about its current financial situation. Again, they've been giving out so much. Money was what the problem is, and they forget that there is this debt ceiling, and the Biden administration is refusing to raise this, and so there is this back and forth with the Republicans and the Democrats as well. We are going to be watching very closely. Once again, for our listeners out there, we are going to get an expert next week and talk in details about the situation over in the United States. Guys, thank you very much for coming in on this Friday with your reports. Have a fantastic and a safe weekend. We'll see you guys again.
Thank you.
You can listen to Korea Now with me, SJ Lee, by downloading the Arirang radio application or tune in online by visiting www.arirangradio.com. So make sure you tune in Mondays through Fridays, 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. Korea time.